This is the follow-up video to my post the other day on Patreon, priming everybody for the V-News lessons that we're going to be covering as it relates to Tesla and space tech per the poll vote that everybody seems to want to delve into these technologies. So in light of that, in honor of that, I begin with this meme. I'm going to start showing a lot more often as we go into these times to come. Because as retroductive common sense, logic, thinking clearly to see through cognitive dissonance and logical fallacies, these times ahead are going to be nuts. The debates were last night, as everybody knows. Space tech, or the Space Force, was mentioned. I don't know if anybody recognized that Donald Trump did have one mention of the Space Force. Here's our friend Darth Trump down here. Where did he go? There he is. If anybody's familiar with some of the Wizard of Oz type stuff we've been doing, but we're gonna cover those topics today because expansive to what you voted for, we're gonna start seeing a lot more drops in the news as time goes along in these next 5 weeks. Funny enough, there are 5 weeks between now and the election when the debates got held, exactly 5 weeks out. November 3rd is an important day that we're going to be discussing as it relates to something that I'd mentioned before in a previous video. This this HBO Plot Against America series, which offers an alternate reality to if Lindbergh had won against FDR in 1942 to follow the end of World War II there. So this is something we're going to go over as well as it relates to the space economy, the space wars that are going on with the fires, something I touched on in the YouTube channel a couple of days ago regarding the Artemis plan. If you didn't watch that video, go to Skullcap Savant on YouTube and you'll find my last video that I did. It's based on the Nikola Tesla paradigm as well. But further to the memes that I've been talking about over on YouTube, everybody who's familiar with my channel should know that the Nikola Tesla meme, even in the current war meme that we discuss, is related to the Nikola Tesla technology paradigm. The boilerplate version is John J. Trump was part of the FBI task force to requisition Nikola Tesla's documents out of his apartment when he died. The trunk of patents and documents got dispersed to God knows who in the military-industrial complex field. It probably is what spawned the inventive cycle that came after that with Howard Hughes and everything related to the secret programs that you find with these government contractors. Lockheed Martin is one we've talked about. Boeing is one we've talked about. Raytheon, Halliburton. All these companies benefited greatly from this man's inventions, and humanity did not. And what we're expecting because of all the riddles coming to fruition here in year zero is that we are going to see an emergence of the space tech come out. And we're going to read some passages from Lana Freeland's Under an Ionized Sky book and Jerry Vasilato's Secret of Cold War Technology book today, too, to start talking a little bit more intelligently about what we're seeing. But that's kind of the primer. We're going to hop around to a couple different topics. The debate from last night's going to come into it a little bit. Excuse me. Sorry. If for nothing else, because of that mention of Space Force, we're not going to concern ourselves too much with the overall politic situation with it, because, pertaining to this presentation, all that matters is the mention of Space Force. So, the whole thing that we're about to go on into in this period of time is also going to relate to some planets in a way. Venus is going to come back into it. But what I think everybody needs to be aware of, starting on October 14th, I always point to Joni Patri's videos if you want to do like an accurate reading as to what's happening with the astrology cycles. She's got it all down to a science. She's a little bit new agey and not altogether critical about I think the overall plays of the geopolitic realm. I don't think she understands economies as well as one can, but she gets the general feel for what the social order is going to be going through pretty well in how she ascribes her videos. And she points out in the one she posted yesterday that, well, we're going into Mercury retrograde again. And this is during a period where we're already in Mars retrograde, where action, anger, all of these things have come to a halt, and there's tremendous friction as we attempt to move forward when the energy has the reverse polarity effect on, you know, the human bioelectric field, which is essentially the effect of what astrology has on the human being. So this is happening in the sign of Libra. The Mercury in retrograde is happening in the sign of Libra. I've been going back to this calendar all year as we've been coming up on the Mercury retrogrades. And remember also, if you're new to the channel, Mercury has great consequence to the research because of Mercury's connection to Hermes. Mercury is Hermes. The other V day on the calendar, which had to do with Valentine's Day, Cupid and Hermes having the connection that they did. We went over that earlier in the year, but most importantly, Mercury's connection to the fascist system in the government, where the House of Representatives has fascias on the wall. And the Mercury dime used to have a fascia right there on the back as well. So every time we know when Mercury is going into retrograde, it's like opposite day. An anti-fascist, like the organization is, for instance, all of a sudden can call themselves a fascist, or an anti-fascist, but in reverse, in retrograde, they become it's like opposite day rules. They become fascists, right? Hey, Shaf, how are you, man? So we've gone over this time and time again on the YouTube channel, on the Patreon channel. I don't need to beat a dead horse with this, but it's important to note because it's also when the riots flare up. Do you guys see, like, from June all the way through July, the last time Mercury was in retrograde, we had a pretty peaceful period in August and September. Because why? Well, I would suspect, based on what we're seeing with the V steganography, that they can't truly do the rioting until opposite day rules are in effect. So they're justified in making the anti-fascists claim that they're not the fascists. Crazy, crazy, crazy stuff, right? But this is kind of how the alchemical equation works on the mind. So, all the way up until, what would you know when it stations on the day of the election? November 3rd is when Mercury goes back direct again, which is an incredibly pivotal day. Why the heck is this day so important? Well, we're going to get to that. Remember, it lines up November 3rd, the last time the election was run on November 3rd. Anyway. This is all important stuff, guys. The Mercury retrograde coming into effect is going to affect the social order in the times to come. So why is it also important to the overall theme we're going through today? Well, because Venus has always had a really important role to play on our psyche as well. If we simply go to the orbital pattern of Venus, which I always seem to forget where I've stored in this presentation because I've added so many flippant slides to it. Here it is. It's right next to where we were. The Venus cycle around, at least in respect to us, as we view Venus, as we orbit and traverse around the sun, is in respect to it, there's a midway point where it goes retrograde 5 times every 8 years. And what we end up getting out of that whole, or 7, I think it's almost 8 years. What we end up getting out of that situation is a pattern, if drawn over time, that resembles a perfect lotus flower, a 5-sided pentagram, as it were. It is actually baked into the orbital pattern of Venus, the sacred geometry of really the conjugate measurements of life itself. Okay, this is the Pythagorean pentagram, and it contains all of the divine ratios that we need to know of in order to understand scalar calculations, because they're not really calculations in the same sense that mathematics ascribes to, like, general relativity, which we're going to find out too as we read through some Alana Freyland and Jerry Vassilato stuff. Believe it or not, this is all related back to Nikola Tesla, and also pertains to the Earth Grid Parasite Network and how I've shown via ley line networks certain structures placed on top of these ley lines likely has an effect on the human mind in these resonance chambers. Let's call them temples or a Capitol building, whatever you want to call it. the pentagram itself is indicative of this geometry. It's a nod in the direction of what's going on, and we of course know that this is the V steganography at play. The 5, the V, the Roman numeral for 5, also the 5 senses, the number of man. So, all of this is again, kind of review. I hammer these topics in just in case I get new viewers from time to time. But Venus, therefore, is a really important planet if we're talking about the intellect because of the preponderance of V. Okay? We're talking planetary structures here, and we're talking magnetic anomalies as they relate to orbits around us. This is what the science of astrology is. But Venus must then have something to do, if we're decoding the V steganography in a Greek fashion, have something to do with the nous, this concept of the intellect that's beyond the 5 senses. And so that intellect that is beyond the 5 senses is represented by the morning star, the planet that also represented the Christ consciousness. Going back and relating this to Jesus. Okay, Venus is synonymous with Jesus in a lot of contexts. So I'm going to begin. This is from David Talbot's Thunderbolts of the Gods, and this is going to be something that gets expanded upon this very concept because of its relationship to the Grand Canyon Gold that we've also discovered in the Wishes and Rainbows and the Wizard of Oz riddle. That is just a cross over. It's an overlay. It's a narrative that's sitting on the top of so many things that we're uncovering right now. Yeah, my stream seems to be interrupted. Hold on. All right, so where we were leaving off here. We're reading through David. Sorry about that. If you were live on Theta, we had a hiccup and I had to stop the stream momentarily. And if you're watching the recorded version of this, it'll be edited out and we'll just continue on. But as it relates to this concept of the V nous, it would indicate that there's some sort of relationship between the riddle of this planet, the goddess energy, which we'll find more about when I decode the actual book, The Venus Families, from Alan Butler. I'm concluding my research on that book, which will probably be the topic of the very next video that I do in this series for patrons. Maybe in a week or so. I think I should have a presentation on that put together. But Venus in particular is very important because it was a captured planet. It's the only planet in our system that seems to have come from outside of this local area of Sol, our sun, S-O-L, the solar system, right? This is all like grade school stuff, but less the Venus coming into the planet that as a captured planet. That's definitely not taught in grade school. But what we have is the prevalence of some event that's happened in our past that caused discharge events, proved Nikola Tesla's technology, if you were just to look back in time in a historical context, proved the discovery of the basis for his technology, was an actual phenomena called the ether that was activated with plasma filaments based on certain conditions being met in the etheric, alchemical, conjugate geometry reactivity of the various forces. I have not as perfect language to describe this stuff as folks like Ken Wheeler does, or folks like Ken Wheeler do. But the basic concept is we've gone over this slightly with our Philosopher's Stone research and the St. Augustine Trinity. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. This is kind of the whole concept of God being think of God as the ether, where everything manifest comes from. It's like in the Vedic Indian context, the enigmatic complete, from which the complete can be taken and yet still remain complete. Thus is the nature of God. It's as if to say that you could take 100% of this away and 100% would remain. How could this be? That's the enigma of God. That's why it's such a mystery to understand God. But if you want deeper lessons on this, we touched on it in a 10-hour series, 4 episodes long, with the Earth grid network relating to the alchemical agenda and what it's all about in terms of, our shift into a new future. But it all connects, as you have likely come to see through all of this research. So Venus, in recent years, a number of scientists and science writers have examined the ancient fears of comets, concluding that these fears originated in a contemporary catastrophe early in human history. Among the most pervasive sources are two books by astronomers Victor Clube and William Napier, The Cosmic Winter and The Cosmic Serpent. Serpent. Remember that word, serpent. Pent. Pent for penta, 5. Ser, S-E-R, in Latin is reduced to the phraseology for to be, essentially. So roughly translated means to be the 5. The word serpent means to be the 5, which is to be a man. 5 is the number of man, 5 digits on each hand, 5 senses. This is the whole contemporary understanding of the V-steganography, right? So interesting that the book is called The Cosmic Serpent. Though the theories are of great interest, they miss a point of profound significance for comparative study of the cosmic theme, or the comet theme. In a global tradition, now fully and convincingly documented, the great comet of ancient fears was a planet. That planet, where Emanuel Velikovsky observed more than 50 years ago, was Venus, this captured planet. Velikovsky, notice how, again, I always point out, it's pretty common in Slavic culture to have your name begin with V, but again, that's why I think it's so. I think it just allows for the Slavic underpinning to be so pervasive, and for people like Vladimir Putin to use the V steganography themselves to their advantage. But make no mistake, I think there's a connection here between Velikovsky and what we see most typically. He had a book called Worlds in Collision, and Velikovsky noted many tales of disaster in which the agent of destruction possessed comet-like attributes. Native cultures, however, identified this agent as the planet Venus. Seriously, actual cultures on Earth did identify this as a new planet that we now know as Venus. The Hopi that actually observed the lightning bolt that hit right where the Grand Canyon's at to create the Grand Canyon. They observed the Mons Marinalis, the crater, not the crater, but let me see if I can find a picture of it because it's in this book too. The gouge, the canyon structure on Mars. There's a different portion of the book that actually goes into. See, look, all the plasma discharges. This is a great book. This is a PDF version of it. You can get it on Amazon as well. I'm certain that there is. Here it is, right here. Valles Marineris. This is the big scar on Mars that goes back, being described in mythology, about this big wound, essentially, that one of the gods got, the god that popularly is described as Ares in Greece. Of course, it's Mars. So all these myths point back to these events of great catastrophe, like Velikovsky points out too, that match up a lot with themes in Joseph Campbell's work. And it more or less gives the field of academia a lot to consider, at very least, because this stuff rings a lot more true with actual science than the concocted BS that the established Smithsonian, Harvard, and Ivy League-led academia fields would purport to be the truth. So, continuing. Velikovsky observed, for example, that in Mexican records. So I mentioned the Hopi, now he's mentioning Mexican records. Venus was the smoking star, as they called it, the very phrase employed for a comet, of course, because it has a tail. So obviously this thing, if it's a captured planet, before it regulates its orbit somewhat, it's going to look like a comet, because if you think about the sun careening through space, it can pick up debris, the vacuum behind it where we persist in, but everything outside the sun is not a vacuum. That's also been proven by the recent Voyager spacecraft finally reaching the edges of the solar system and not being able to penetrate it because it's a little bubble. It's a big vacuum bubble that's created behind the sun. That's where we exist. So not all of space is a vacuum. Whatever the sun is coursing through is something else, whether it's a charge or a charged environment, a magnetically frictionized environment. It's a mystery a little bit because we have not been able to penetrate that wall or barrier to really truly understand the nature of what's out there. That's the great beyond. Like that's the frontier we got to get to. That's where Nikola Tesla's technology will help us get. So again, Space Force being mentioned last night in the debates, big deal. Anyhow, comet comes in, gets captured by sun, gets put into orbit is kind of how we're tracking this. And when this occurs in the Mayan text, both the Americans and the Near East found recurring association with Venus with long flowing hair or a beard, as they would describe it, right? Again, like the tail. Two of the most common hieroglyphs for the comet in the ancient world. So these were commonly understood symbols across cultures. That's pretty significant. It's semantically similar across cultures if you're just looking into the linguistic underpinning of it. So that same planet, among the Babylonians and other cultures, was called the Great Flame or the Torch of Heaven, a widespread hieroglyph for a comet among ancient peoples. Another popular symbol for the comet was the serpent or the dragon. Serpent or the dragon. Emphasize those again because it's the basis for the research itself. You know, if we're just looking, if I can zoom in here, this is kind of that graphic that I've constructed that is reminiscent of what the V steganography does to a person. If you're resonating with the reverse polarity always in your root, you're going to be a materialist. If you've got an upright V pattern about you, it's called the lambda, and this is what measures a lot of sacred mathematical mathematical consequences in Greek metaphysics. There you have it. And it is also what represents of course, the heart energy, the green, represented by the Merkaba, the Star of David structure. So this is all very reminiscent of what? The serpents, the twin snakes, the kundalini energy going up the spine. Activated ether is all kundalini is. So it's actually Nikola Tesla science to learn about Far East metaphysics. And of course, the serpents, when they are totally awakened, gain wings, become dragons. This is where the mythology of the dragon comes from. It's a winged serpent. However, why don't we have actual archaeological evidence of dragons ever existing? Because they didn't. It's a myth. It's a concept. Not all of the chimerical creatures. This is what's confusing too. Is it would seem that not all of the chimerical creatures like the minotaurs and such were totally false in terms of their existence in ancient times. There seems to be evidence in some of the old alchemical texts that suggests that DNA experiments gone wrong have led to these chimerical creatures that were half man, half beast. So it does become confusing when you start to look at, paintings in Babylon of the Sarush or the Sphinx. In the Sphinx itself, kind of like the dragon, it would also seem is not a chimera but a mythological creature representing Ahriman, who we've also talked about before. But I'm gonna have to digress a little bit from that topic. We'll expand on it in other videos, of course. But we've got to get back to reading the text because I've got about another 50 minutes or so before I've got to call it. But according to Velikovsky, the history of the comet Venus, remember, inspired some of the most powerful themes of ancient myth and ritual. So its very arrival kickstarted meme culture in a certain sense as it relates to this specific star. I mean, everybody's familiar with meme culture these days. It absolutely was prevalent back then too, in the form of symbols and hieroglyphs. Really funny how little we've changed as humanity over the years. We just, we extol the experience in a little bit of a different way. So in the collective memory of this global upheaval, obviously it's pervaded across all generations since, earth-shaking battles in the sky between the gods, these thunderbolts being thrown back and forth between the planets. Why are the planets throwing thunderbolts back and forth? The ancients might have thought and pondered on. Because there's actual friction. Venus is coming in. It spins the opposite way as all the other planets, as we've talked about. Its orbit direction, or its orbital direction goes the other. Its rotation direction. Excuse me. Its orbit direction is the same, but its rotational direction is opposite of all of the other planets. So since Velikovsky's work, independent investigations have confirmed his conclusion through many additional lines of evidence. In ancient times, Venus was the prototypical comet, providing the original content of the worldwide comet fears. It's the reason why people fear comets in general. They're harmless for the most part, right? But holy crap, when a whole planet comes in and causes this whatever kind of chaos that it did, pretty hard to forget. So the ancient idea that appears to have reflected all major cultures, the Peruvian Chaska, or Venus, is the long-haired star. The universal phrase for the comet is similar to Venus occurring in Old World and New World contexts. So what we can take from some of these Aztec illustrations, look again, the dragon being represented in the comet form. A lot of the Venusian Renaissance art points to these themes as well. And if you look at David Matheson's work, who's brilliant, by the way, I got to figure out if I can interview the guy, because he's not David Matheson, Mathisen is his name, and he is a brilliant researcher who looks into mythology in paintings like this and other things, and is able to paint a very clear view of what's happening in relation to specific planetary arrangements and what these paintings convey specific to whatever area in the sky they are portraying. He's a brilliant mythological researcher, and his stuff gets a lot into this as well. But mainly how this all connects to the current war situation is that we're talking about the gold in the Grand Canyon from a constant basis, and it does seem that the mystery of history is all tied up into this event. It seems like it all coalesces back to this event as being so catastrophic and so crippling to the mind of comprehension on the Earth that we are afraid to look collectively beyond what the arrival of Venus might have indicated. We were talking last time that there are now studies from the James Clerk Maxwell telescope in Hawaii that show, certainly enough, that there's life on Venus of some sort, maybe up in the clouds. I was speculating, as you recall, back on the way that it was phrased in the article. Could it be some sort of even hyper-intelligent race like humanoids living in Cloud City environments like on Bespin in Star Wars? A planet that's just like Venus. That's my speculation. I'm kind of a wild-ass speculator on stuff like this because something is afoot. And whether I'm altogether accurate with it or not, I think I'm more accurate with this assumption than what's told to us. Let's just put it that way. So if we're going to assume that on this errant planet that maybe got captured from another system as the sun went by it. Oh hey, Konsikandar. I think I said that right. Tell me if I didn't. Let me just say hello to you now. But if we're tracking our perspective correctly, it would be irresponsible for us not to investigate this from that context. But anyway, there's a lot that's going to be happening. As we saw with the Arecibo, as I mentioned as well, telescope that broke. And then, like I mentioned the other day on the YouTube channel, the Artemis plan having to do with the moon. And what does this have to do with Venus? Well, Venus is the divine feminine archetype for the goddess, as was portrayed in some of those paintings. So this is going to be a Cliff Notes version, but the divine feminine, you see a lambda here. Oh, but the lambda has the moon behind it, and the moon is the thing that controls menstrual cycles. And there's menstrual blood running through the legs of the lambda, hijacking whatever truth that we're getting from having our noose hijacked by the V glyph. It's just flipped upside down, you see? So what does this have to do with anything? Well, the first woman on the moon, suspicious about this and the divine feminine being hijacked. The fact that the plan concludes in 2024 is when they want to get this done by, and very, very famously, I disabled my ad blocker. No, I didn't, but hopefully they won't. But yeah, they're gonna give me a hard time for this. But as people have seen, let me get back to it here. Where was it? There it is. The 2024 eclipse. Remember the 7-year tribulation period that is alluded to in the Bible seems to be, as evidence would point to, the period between the two eclipses that happened between 2017 and 2024. Complete solar eclipses over the United States, over the New Madrid Fault specifically. That all has to do with the Venus riddle, the Wizard of Oz, the lightning that struck the planet from the planet Venus to cause not only the Grand Canyon, but the Lake of the Ozarks, Valles Marineris on Mars. See how tightly woven this event for mythology was, and how I think the key to where we're going as humanity revolves around us finding out those truths. Yes, it has to do with Antarctica. I think absolutely. But if I'm going to be a betting man, I'm saying that the technology that we're probably finding down in Antarctica right now is post this Venusian incoming event, because the conditions, it would seem, for Venus to come in this fashion were made were appropriated by the planet beyond Mars blowing up in some ancient war as well. So you seem to have ancient war, planet blows up beyond Mars, blows away the atmosphere of Mars, makes Mars vulnerable, disrupts the overall charge of the solar system environment. Sun is now attractive, just like you learn in chemistry class, the valence, the outside charge of an atom. You call them electrons in chemistry, even though the electron, as we'll discover when we look at science through the lens of the ether, is kind of an incorrect position to take on particle science. But it certainly is a charge, and you follow that charge around the atom. But when it loses a valence electron or a valence charge, it's now more attractive to outside items that it can bring into its orbit. So if you can now imagine the sun doing that, just like a valence electron would do, Venus may have very well said, there's a charge gap, I'm going to come fill in that gap, and oh my god, it causes all sorts of disruption in the solar system environment for the time, but ultimately it rebalances things. And what's so significant about a couple of things we've talked about? Well, remember, I've showed that Nine Nanya's research being so keen on Venus passing through the horns of Taurus in July, and how that relates to Isis, how Isis is related to Venus itself, because Isis is the representation in the Egyptian mythos of Venus. But we've all seen also, let me see where I think she's got some of the iconography for Isis in here as well. Nope. Not seeing it. Here it is. Isis, well, at the top of Taurus anyway. So everybody can remember, because I don't know if she goes over the Isis symbolism in this particular video, but she was doing it in other videos. But Isis always has this headdress on top, just like the Taurus. It's got the horns of the bull and Venus going right through it. And what happened this year was that Venus, in the most perfect fashion that it would have ever done in a 25 or a 24,000 year precession cycle, passed right through those horns. So what does that signify but something of an awakening to whatever lies dormant beyond this mystery, is what I would say. And we've got we've got all sorts of things to point to in terms of the retrograde environment, why the timing for the particular release of the history mystery might line up right alongside November 3rd this year. Time will tell. Time will tell. But this is something that we're gonna discover. We're gonna come back to some of Ken Wheeler's stuff here in a second. But the space weather itself is one of the main political items of the day because there are so many fires and so many acres burning in California. And this is just the CAL FIRE website and the newest up-to-date information on all the acreage that's burning. Over here it says most of the biggest ones. The SSU Lightning Complex, the LNU Lightning Complex, the North Complex. Something's interesting. Lightning Complex. I started looking at all of the glass fire, right? They always have interesting names on how they label these. Apple fire, the rattlesnake fire, the bobcat fire, the bullfrog fire, the fox fire. So bullfrogs and foxes are anthropomorphizations. Bullfrog, the Texas TCU bullfrogs, and how that relates to the MK Ultra programs in the CIA, because Jose Delgado did his original experiments down there in TCU on frogs and bulls. The bullfrog. I think and the fox, of course, the fox faction, the Jesuits, the lightning complex, the activation of plasma filaments in the ether. So there are some riddles here that I haven't completely picked apart, but they're worth looking into because, as it relates to Alana Freeland's work, let me just read you guys a passage. This would be a perfect time for us to talk about the space weaponry being used probably by China in this weather warfare that we see. We're flooding the crap out of them and they're burning the crap out of us, is how it would seem the battle's going on up there. But this is going to be page 89, Alana Freeland's book, Under an Ionized Sky, Chapter 2, Ether, Plasma, and Scalar Waves, getting understanding for the technological advancements that do exist up there. So basically, starts out, I'm not going to read the quotes from the beginning. There are a few different quotes she includes relating to the ether from well-known people like Heinrich Hertz and Michael Gabriel. But she starts the chapter by saying, imagine the sun's magnetic field divided from pole to pole, like sections of an orange, like an edible orange is what she's saying. Each section oriented to its opposite section, so that when the sun rotates, the Earth's fields change with the sun's changing fields. So imagine each orange slice, right? And as it rotates and as it goes into another wedge, there's a differential in the magnetic charge that's associated with that, right? Now imagine that everything is connected and speaking from a variety of levels to whoever is listening at that particular level, an intelligent and conversational universe waiting for us to listen and familiarize ourselves with its cipher language. Oh, I love that she put in there the cipher language, because that's what we're investigating, the metaphysics of the V cipher. All of the science that we're talking about in the history mystery and the current war is pointing to Nikola Tesla having also discovered this, and us having to piece it all together because he wasn't able to get his technology out into the hands of humanity. It got hijacked for special interest groups, where it remains. All related to a cipher language. The V. And other things too, not just the V. Like DJ's X, Dark Journalist's X steganography is another one to go look at. We'll mention it here in a second. But she continues, the universe may indeed be Hilbert's space of infinite dimensions. Quantum mechanics implies an infinity of different shapes and topologies that fit together as waves, each interfering with another. Intercept the charges around the terminals of generators or batteries, and you may discover endless, hidden in plain sight, free energy. What are we saying here with Nikola Tesla, right? The term we have needed for the untapped free energy potentials of pure ether energy is scalar, not electromagnetic. Ether and scalar energy have shared many epithets. Prana, chi, ki, zero-point energy, tachyon energy, biophotonic energy, rife energy, orgon, life force, kundalini, like I said, kundalini energy, etc. Yeah, both ether, from the Greek eino, to light up or kindle, and scalar waves, which is a quantity, but a quantity with magnitude, but not direction, have been suppressed for a century. So that's to say that the term ether, it's been outside of the popular science for years. Hey, Sentifi, yeah, this is basically school. I'm doing a presentation here. If you're coming to me for the first time, I actually do research based on a practice called steganography, which decodes it decodes the mysteries of the past, of science, of academia that are out in plain sight in the news, and gives the reader, gives the viewer a tool, a cipher as it will, to decode that environment in front of you. So that's what we're getting into. We're talking space tech today, and this is I'm streaming my Patreon videos for my patrons. I usually post them over here after I'm done. But for now, to promote the Theta platform, of course, I've been streaming them live over here too. So good to have you. Go check out my other stuff on YouTube as well if you haven't. Same name, Skullcap Savant, over on YouTube if you want to get a further primer on what we're talking about here. So now's where we're gonna start talking about our main man again. So I'm gonna scroll back down to him, the badass of the hour, and the truths of the ether. They've been laying dormant for a century. Why has this been? Basically, it is the same old story. The elite bend and suppress inventors and scientific genius so as to control revelations of scientific truths and inventions according to their own timetable. Nikola Tesla's experiments revolved around scalar waves, not electromagnetic waves. And so this is kind of like, in that popular way, people are like, it's an electric universe, man. It's not. It's an etheric universe. And that's the junk narrative that's put out there by the academic community that know the truth, but it's like flat earth. It's like flat earth. It's not as bad, it's not as egregious, but it's the same tactic being used by the guys in the know that hold all the patents for Nikola's technology now, that would have you not take advantage of it. All based around ether. It has to do with the money. It's just money, guys. It's last 100 years, the Fed's been in place. I mean, it's all for capital control. I mean, it's a conspiracy, but it mostly has to do with the slavery of your taxable situation and your agency as a human. Blame the Federalists. Blame the Federalists. Blame James Madison. Blames Alexander Hamilton. Blame those guys. This is how we got where we're at, basically. Anyway, Nikola Tesla. Back to him. Nikola Tesla is one of these inventors, obviously, that they've suppressed. The main one, and his experiments revolved around scalar waves, not electromagnetic waves, as he so thought to transform electrons into vortex electrons. So this gets to that concept I was just talking about. When you don't look at an electron as a particle, and you instead look at it as charge, just charge, a moment of charge. You can still look at its orbit, its so-called orbit, around a nucleus of an atom or an atomic structure, around the protons and the neutrons that make up that nucleus, as an actual phenomenon. But it's incorrect to call it a particle. This is what the double slit experiments explanation is so falsely brandished out there by anybody explaining that. Oh, the fact that things can be a particle and a wave at the same time. You're just looking at the same thing from a 90-degree different angle because of how it passed through the slit. It never stops being an ether perturbation. That's all it ever was, an ether perturbation, a ripple of the ether. So that's what he's talking about with vortex electrons. Vortex equals ether perturbation. So, faster than light, yes, that's right, faster than light. Scalar waves are actually spiraling waves, and they actually hop over magnetic currents to reach their destination, which is why when you hear of UFO accounts where they just take off into the sky, I've seen this. I see them a dozen times a year. Walking my dog at night. I live in Phoenix, the Phoenix Valley area, so I do see a fair amount of these things. Most likely man-made. I mean, let's be honest. They're UFOs, but likely, made by us. And when they just take off, it's really impressive. When they just disappear, you can see the direction generally that they go in, but boy, they're gone, and there's no noise. What they're doing is they're creating this scalar wave path for themselves to hop across the crests of the magnetic current that we can't see, of course, but it allows them to pass through. Get from here to France. Imagine getting from here to France in the manner of like 12 seconds, that type of thing, right? So anyway, back to the book. Scalar waves. They're continually branching out into recurring fractal patterns, and they coagulate as matter, plasma, when there's enough charge around them. So this is what a lightning strike is. Again, back to the Cal Fire incident. We got 2 lightning complex fires. What's that all about? Might have something to do with the Lightning winning the Stanley Cup? The other day? I haven't even gotten to this yet, but it's too good not to bring up at this point. The Tampa Bay Lightning just beat the Dallas Stars, the 5. So the Stars, their logo, where's the Dallas Stars logo? Let's just do standings here. This is ESPN's website. Tampa Bay's logo is as so. It's got a lightning bolt through it. We're talking lightning here. And of course, Dallas Stars, their logo is a pentagram. So, what are we talking about here? Leading up to the Mercury retrograde calendar, and we're in the pre-shadow period of this election period that we're about to go through. Bringing it back to the beginning of the video, and the spell that's on the Venus, or the spell of V that's on the noose, rather, as it relates to Venus, the pentagram, the Pythagorean geometry, and the Space Force, which is a cross-section of the lambda that exists here. This is the Space Force logo right here. So there are deep mysteries hidden underneath all of this, guys. This is what's so fun about what we're living through right now, because we are about to learn the true nature of the universe collectively, and that's going to open up endless possibilities for invention, is what it boils down to, right? So, anyway, that's what Alana Freyland, at least for today's video, has got to say about Nikola Tesla. Picking it up in Jerry Vasilato's book, his book opens with a lot of these concepts. Secrets of Cold War Technology. The stuff, of course, that legends were made of during the Cold War period, as stolen by Donald Trump's uncle, our friend Darth Trump, if we're going with the Star Wars theme, whose uncle, John J. Trump, didn't steal, but requisitioned, one could colloquially say stole, though, with the FBI, all of Nikola Tesla's patents, and that became the focus of our weapons, our dark weapons programs, which undoubtedly the Nazis got their hands on, because they were the CIA installations. So, Chapter 1, Nikola Tesla and radiant energy. This is another thing. The luminiferous ether is what they used to call this in the 1800s, or radiant energy. It wasn't free energy. It was energy that was always latent but never expressed. That's essentially what we're talking about here in this concept, pervaded through all of the development and research leading up to these UFO craft that we're talking about, taking advantage of the medium that popular academic science likes to label as dark matter, falsely. It's hilarious. So the anomaly of the radiant energy, right? Deep in the heart of many conspiracy topics, sits a desperate desire to rediscover the lost magic of nature. It was with this lost magic, this qualitatively accessed communion with nature, that late Victorian researchers were all too familiar. Their numerous accounts cannot be rationalized against the wall of academic regulation, which prides itself in explaining all natural phenomena through simple mechanisms, the reductions of natural phenomena to meaningless force chains. Said a different way, Albert Einstein's theory of relativity is bullshit, right? Like, just flat out. Because it presumes a false paradigm of mathematics based on something that is completely an unknown unknown, where ether is actually, in every sense, a known unknown, at least at the time where a lot of this academic research got pushed down below the surface. Let's remember, GE had a blank check that they were given to both Nikola Tesla and Charles Proteus Steinmetz in the 30s to do whatever in the 20s and the 30s to do whatever the hell they wanted. Whatever their research got, it was popular science of the day. Literally, popular mechanics, popular science were interviewing these guys all the time. Go back and look at those old interviews. That's where you can find your context. And you know, back in these old interviews of what Nikola Tesla was especially saying about how much of a crackpot Albert Einstein was for thinking this way and for pushing this false science. Tesla dies, all of a sudden, relativity is the new order of the day. Just so happens, our main man, FDR, and his plot to, you know, install what the New Deal on top of America, now we have the Green New Deal, probably ruined any hope that we had of this. So that's kind of how this is you know, coming back into it too. But anyway, I digress and have to continue because the academics are the ones that push this down below the surface. That's why we have such a hard time coming back to the truth, because the academics lie. But even in the journals of the day, I'll continue. Page 19. The science world absolutely was awash in discoveries and anomalous phenomena at the time, portraying energies and dynamics which defy mechanistic explanation. This is Nikola Tesla's day, right? The lost magic of vital energy. Vital energy. That's a great way to put another label that you can ascribe to ether. Vital energy. Developments which came from the present century represent empirical discoveries which have yet to have theoretical precedent. Right? This is where we still sit. We have all of these correct bases for etheric technologies. Oh, but there's no theoretical precedent because it's not recognized that metaphysics is an actual science. It's just physics, material reality, and everything that we can see, feel, touch, smell, everything of the five senses. Remember, what's beyond the five senses of the V? What's beyond? Reactivate the lambda that's been mind controlled away from you, like in Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange, as is painted the picture of as the guy with the Guy Fawkes mask in the V for Vendetta tale, and how the Jesuits and one of the main factions of the world that control academia use this very symbology to brandish you with their false history narrative for the last 500 years, essentially, ever since their inception. The art of war, guys, right? So these developments which came within our present century represent empirical discoveries. They don't have theoretical precedent. In the very midst of a marvelous epoch stand several personages who must forever remain as legends of qualitative science. One of these is Nikola Tesla, right? You gotta stop taking it off of him. We'll just leave it here for now. One of them was Nikola Tesla. He represents the absolute rule by which to comprehend the successive military projects that came out of his research, seemingly separate and unconnected experimental ventures observed through the 20th century. So a couple pages later, he's discussing that the whole time, everybody's familiar with Nikola Tesla's, you know, battles with J.P. Morgan, but it's not always correct in the assumptions of what his interactions actually were. Students are taught, page 24, he continues in the same chapter, that Tesla developed non-rotating high-frequency generators. And this is actually what the current war was all about, AC versus DC. So So, all right, see you later, KDAX. Thanks for having you. I'm glad you can make it. Hope you can join the next one. Watch the Patreon video when it's posted. Anyway, the name of the whole deal with Morgan not being able to monetize, therefore the AC current, is kind of BS as well, because there are many court documents indicating that he was in court proceedings, the minutes of which are public in the Wardenclyffe Letters is the name of the book. Awesome book, which are transcripts based around what the Wardenclyffe Tower, which is depicted on the front of this book, was really based around. And I've gone over that in one of my earlier YouTube videos as it relates to the Earth Grid Parasite Network in great detail. So go to my YouTube channel, watch my earlier videos from September of last year when I started posting about that stuff, and you'll have a much more deep dive lesson on what I'm talking about there. But the AC/DC current war, the current war meme that's playing out actually between the companies of Nikola and Tesla. Elon Musk now is coming into the distractive. What am I trying to say here? Is running a distraction campaign of sorts that is confusing to me as of these last couple days, which we're going to pick apart as well. But this is the false story that we were fed. AC and DC, these rotating currents. This has nothing to do with the ether. It has to do with magnetism, but it doesn't have to do with the ether. So the name of Tesla is inexorably and tragically equated only with alternating currents is an absolute travesty. It is in this essential error that academics, engineers, young students, and avid experimenters have too long remained in the dark. So that's why it's so important to take this perspective, because if we don't, well, we run the risk of not exactly getting to the bottom of what the ether has in store for us, right? Because it's a false perspective. So, though engineers will still erroneously equate Tesla only with high-frequency alternating current, a recent and prolific experimenter has proven all these suppositions to be fraudulent. While Tesla was in fact the first to discover the high-frequency alternating current realm, there was a more important discovery which is rarely outlined. The truth of this second great discovery remains unrecognized and underappreciated. But what was the critical event which few recognize and which fewer still have the patience to extract from Tesla's literature? When did this event occur, and how does Tesla address the finding? We're talking about the ether, right? Except for the consummate achievements of engineer Eric Dollard, he's a contemporary guy. Eric Dollard's alive still. He's alive now. Undoubtedly the most brilliant expositor of Teslean technology in the world today, we too would have believed the error. What Mr. Dollard has successfully demonstrated is the absolute separation between Tesla's polyphase period and impulse technology, which he explains has 50 years of experiments conducted until his passing. Mr. Dollard experimentally vindicated most of Tesla's basic and seemingly outlandish claims. In a series of experimental demonstrations, exact reproduction of Tesla systems, Mr. Dollard has been able to show us evidence that polyphase Teslean technology relied entirely upon a strange and special electro-radiant phenomenon. How did Tesla arrive at this new and revolutionary development, and how long did engineers perceive the space to work? Again, it's the mystery of the ether, his discovery, the luminiferous ether. So we'll continue on that story in a future video, but that's enough of a primer for you guys to kind of get what we're dealing with, I think, with the space technology. There is a whole orbital array. The Star Wars program under Reagan installed it all up there. We have the Lightning Complex fires. We have the Tampa Bay Lightning, of course, winning the Stanley Cup over the Stars. It's just too good. I guess we'll have to wait to see I guess I got to get back into the sports decoding too, if this is going to be the case. But we also have this Plot Against America movie coming. And this is kind of how I'm gonna close out today's video and start off again another one here in the very near future, within the next week or so, that kind of expand on some additional topics. watching some clips from some videos and decoding them. But as we course toward the Mercury retrograde, again, that starts on October 14th and goes all the way through November 3rd, we have to remember that the gematria around 113 is as such, right? Hope people are looking at this, right? Does anybody see the 113 pattern here? Green screen, mainstream, not true, bullshit. I could do this for 15 other terms in gematria where 113 was the had the capacity to show you that whatever this is, it's a lie. Anything related to 113 is a lie, it's false, it's misdirection. But remember, we're observing the opposite day effects of Mercury retrograde, especially as the fascists would act. So the anti-fascists, again, under Mercury retrograde, under Hermetic principles, become backwards, so they're actually fascists in this period, like we described in the beginning of the video. What we have to assume, I'm thinking, is that because it's still technically in retrograde and goes direct on the 3rd, this is a perfect window to not tell a lie, but for opposite day rules to be in effect for 113 on that day as well, and to potentially be a window for great secrets to be revealed instead on this election day. What would the paradigm have been like if FDR didn't remain president for 12 years and, in my opinion, ruined the country? It's not even an opinion. I mean, we'll do another video on FDR at some point and his true fascist... He's the fascist. It's hilarious. Oh, if... excuse me. I say because the whole plot of this miniseries on HBO was... If Lindbergh became president, then the country would have declined into fascism. But what we have that came out of this instead was fascism. It's what Kennedy almost corrected for. If they didn't kill him, oh my God, if they just didn't kill Kennedy, we would have had such a different world. But it's okay. We're getting it now. We're getting it with Space Force. We're getting it with the ether technology. We're getting it with the reveal of the history mystery. It's a great time to be alive. For everybody wondering what the fasces represent, by the way, the axe itself is the government. The axe itself is the government, the blade, okay? It's easy, though, to look at the weapon of the axe and say, you know, I can render this thing moot by breaking it in half. It's just a stick. And it renders the sharp edge of the axe useless or inert. However, the more and more thin little bundles of twigs that you pack around the outside of it, the larger the diameter of that mass becomes, and the harder it becomes to break. But these little sticks, they all represent the people that can be easily bought and paid for, to be bound around it. And this is the concept that is pervading through the Antifa organization, because they are these individual twigs pointlessly surrounding this axe that we could very easily break if they would just stop. Just stop. Just stop. Get to the bottom of... By the way, again, the House of Representatives, a federalist institution, not saying take away the Senate now. The Senate's there to make the laws. But the House of Representatives has always been horseshit. The House of Representatives, if you recall, James Madison, if anybody's familiar with Federalist Paper, the Federalist Papers number 10, all about factions and control, they used Jesuit casuistry to convince the public 20 years into its existence that we needed a representative body for yourself. You can't represent yourself. We need districts. We need you don't know enough about government. Leave that to us to figure out policies to be turned into laws, right? And there it all started. We had an awesome country started by some Freemasons, but the correctly minded Freemasons. You've got two orders of thought in Freemasonry. People always think Freemasonry bad. No, the Enlightenment principles and the Hermetic principles that are based in Freemasonry that George Washington was of the school of thought of. There were two factions in the Founding Fathers story, guys. One was controlled by the bankers and were in the pockets of the Rothschilds. They were the Federalists. They were the ones that started the House of Representatives. We're in a mess now. Like, it's time that we get this crap dealt with. It's been 200 years since we've had like an actual sovereignly represented government where each individual had their own voting power. That's why we have the mess of a situation that we're in from the debates that were also last night, right? Again, candidates accuse each other of military insults. Trump mentioned Space Force. Where was it? Space Force. There it is. So in the question regarding that Chris Wallace, also a Jesuit, Fox News, Jesuit, casuistry. Just think of Chris Wallace as a Jesuit, and it'll be much easier for you if he ever like moderates anything again as to why he's acting how he's acting. But the Space Force was mentioned by Donald Trump, which is what I was waiting for. We're building it back up again, rebuilding it with the military, including the Space Force. Fixing the VA. The VA is such a mess, he says. Fixing the VA is such a mess. What do you think he's talking about, guys? What do you think he's talking about here? The V and the A. They're reversed. V steganography right there in lane with the Space Force, the space text, the Space Force statement. Holy shit, right? So anyway, it's going to be a wild election season. We'll continue this series here, like I said, in about a week or so. Fun stuff coming out of space and into space, guys. Don't forget to check out my stuff over on YouTube, Skullcap Savant. If you're coming over here on Theta and haven't gone and checked out my other stuff over there, I've got hours and hours of these V steganography decodes. And of course, my Patreon channel will keep expanding on this concept of the space technology for some time. There are quite a few videos that we can do on this topic, and as they relate, they will absolutely cross overlap with the Wizard of Oz and some of the Bitcoin reset stuff, which is where I think I'm going to focus the next video on, is around those specific topics. So until then, it's been fun. I love y'all. Thetaverse, it's a ton of fun being out there and recording these live. I'm still making badges. Those badges are coming. I'm going to make some badges for patrons first, and then we'll have some giveaways and stuff, and there's going to be some interactivity that gets thrown into there. Oh my God, Chef, you gave me a 10 Theta Fuel donation too. Thank you. I didn't recognize that you'd done that until just now. Thank you. Everybody, again, love you. As always, have a safe week, and enjoy yourself some V out there. Let me know if you find anything that is curious, because I love getting comments from the V-Cypher community with what they see more than anything almost. Take it easy, guys.